All right, I'm going to start this whole thing over again. We're discussing free will. I'm countering a argument made by Alex O'Connor, otherwise known as Cosmic Skeptic on YouTube, who thinks that we do not have free will. I think that free will is too broad a concept. It's too amorphous and general a thing to for us to consider whether or not we have free will. Rather than say we have free will, I would say that we have the ability to make choices with caveats. And I'm going to get into a lot of what I mean by that as this goes on. Let's let Alex begin, and I will stop and start as I have things to say about it.
Covered well by Stephen. So with that out of the way, let's get into this. Here is my case against free will. Now, the first issue that we have to face is, of course, the definition of free will. And since when I'm debating this, I'm the one who's denying the existence of something that someone else believes in, it really needs to be that someone else's definition that I'm using, which is why a video like this can be quite tricky. Now, this doesn't absolve me of any burden of proof. Unlike my passive atheism, I make the active claim that I think free will does not exist. But I can only do this once I'm sure that we all mean the same thing by free will. So for ease's sake, I'll go with the most succinct and least controversial definition that I've been able to come up with, which is this. Free will is the ability to have acted differently. And what I mean by this is that if we were to wind back the clock in any situation, it was completely within the realm of possibility for you to have acted differently to the way that you actually did.
I think that that is too esoteric a thought experiment. All we need to say is that you have the ability to act deliberately, as opposed to what I call being on autopilot. I don't think that we're on autopilot. To say that if you wound back the clock, you could have done something differently is just the same as saying that you had the ability to choose. And I think that we have the ability to choose things under certain circumstances, which I'll get into later. But anyway.
For instance, it would have been completely possible for me to have said bonjour at the beginning of this video instead of good morning, and the choice to say the latter was completely within my control. The idea is that you are in control of your actions, and any decisions that you make are determined only by your own conscious self. But the thing is, there are so many things wrong with this that it's difficult to know where to start. I'll borrow a line of thought from Dr. Harris here. Let's begin by considering what would have to be true in order for us to truly have total free will, to be able to have acted differently. Well, firstly, we would need to be aware of everything that is influencing our actions, including environmental factors, our precise mood, the influence of other people, the influence of past experiences, and more. Secondly, we would need to be in complete control of every one of them.
I don't think that's true. Just because we're not aware of everything involving our decision-making doesn't mean that we're aware of nothing involving our own decision-making. And just because we don't have control over everything doesn't mean we don't have control over anything. So, and likewise, just because if we had control over some things, it wouldn't logically follow that we necessarily had control over everything. I don't think those necessarily follow from one another.
Neither of these are true or even possible. Now, you might concede this, but not think it a problem. Okay, you say, so I can't control all of the factors that led me to like the taste of ice cream, but on a more mundane level, I'm still in complete control over whether I choose chocolate or vanilla. Not so fast. Again, consider this most simple of choices, chocolate or vanilla. Or, if it's easier, consider the last mundane choice that you had to make. Walk or drive this morning, go out or stay in tonight. Think about why you chose one or would choose one over the other.
Now, it's really important to consider here, he's laying out two different choices. So far, he's only been talking about two choices for which there's really no right or wrong answer. There's no better or worse option. Chocolate or vanilla, it's your own subjective taste. Go out or stay in, it's your own subjective taste. When we get into territory where there is a right and wrong answer and a better and worse decision that you can make, it's going to be a little different.
So what would make me choose vanilla over chocolate?
I hope the audio
There
is
is
not
only
cutting out for
one
everyone
possible
else.
answer, which I'll elaborate on shortly. I would need to want it more than chocolate. In order to choose vanilla, I'd need to want vanilla. But is this something I can control? Can I control what it is that I want? Not a chance. Consider the fact that you, presumably, don't want to punch your mother in the face. Can you choose to want to do that? This isn't the same thing as choosing to do it. Could you choose to want to?
So going forward, when he says wants, let's substitute a phrase, a word. Instead of wants, let's say desires. Okay, we're talking right now about desires.
No more than I could choose to want vanilla over chocolate.
And he's quite right that we don't choose what we desire.
I just want chocolate more than vanilla. That's just a fact about myself that I can't change. But okay, let's go further, you say. Of course, I can't choose to want vanilla over chocolate when I really want chocolate, but what if I just decided, in the full knowledge that I would prefer chocolate, to go for vanilla anyway, just for the sake of regaining my free will and nothing else? Well, I'm afraid you'd still face the same problem. The exact same problem, in fact. In order to do that, you'd need to want to regain your free will as you see it. Why is your desire to prove a point like this stronger than the desire to have the ice cream you prefer?
Why is one desire greater than the other? There's an answer to that. It's not the answer he gives. Here's the answer he gives.
It just is.
No. The answer is not it just is. Your desire for one thing over the other is because the thing that you desire appears good to you. Why does the vanilla appear good to you more than chocolate? Because you prefer vanilla. It's your own subjective taste. And who knows? It goes back to your childhood. It goes back to your taste buds. It is your physiology, all of those sorts of things. Those things are determined. That's true. But it isn't it just is. There is an answer to that question. In terms of that causation, it's just complicated. Why is your desire to prove that point greater than your desire to want vanilla? Because you see a higher good in indicating, in determining, in demonstrating that you have free will. All of this is going to boil down to the good.
And if it happened not to be, you'd have chosen the ice cream that you do prefer. The key takeaway is this: you cannot determine your wants. Think of something you want. Try to not want it. Think of something you don't want and try to want it.
This is
it's
true.
not possible. And even if it were, in order to change a don't want into a want, you'd need to want it. And vice versa. To change a want into a don't want, you'd need to want to not want it.
We are born with innate desires. Two kinds. We have natural desires and acquired desires. Natural desires are the things that we call needs. They are the things without which we cannot do. The things that we are driven by virtue of the fact that we're human beings to seek. Food, water, shelter, friendship, education, knowledge. Those things we cannot do without as the kinds of beings that we are. And then we have acquired desires. Chocolate or vanilla, that's an acquired desire. Staying in or going out, that's an acquired desire. So natural and acquired desires. There isn't just one thing called desire that drives us, or what he calls wants. There isn't just one want that's driving us. We have two different kinds. Natural and acquired. Keep that in mind.
You simply can't control what you want.
That's
now,
true.
That's one piece of the puzzle, and it may seem odd to leave it there, but just wait until we put them together. Okay, the next piece of the puzzle is to convince you of this fact, that there are only two reasons, none more in any circumstances, for which you will ever do anything. In fact, it's impossible for you to ever do anything for any reason other than one of these two. And those two reasons are because you want to or because you're forced to. Mm-hmm. And this is fundamentally important and worth really understanding and thinking about. You will only ever do anything in your entire life because you either want to or are forced to. That's it. No exceptions. And because of the fact that nobody seems to believe me on this point at first, I'll give you a common objection that I hear all the time. In fact, I recently spoke to ex-NFL player Aryan about free will on his podcast. Link again will be in the description once it's up. And he, playing devil's advocate, brought up the following. Consider exercise. Consider going to the gym. Most people don't want to go to the gym, but they do it anyway. Surely this is an example of someone doing something freely and not because they want to or because they're forced to. Not really. Because there has to be a reason for going to the gym. And for most people, and for Aryan, it's something like to stay healthy, to stay in shape, to live longer, whatever it may be. So we have to ask, again, the same fundamental question. Why is the desire to stay healthy stronger than the desire to go to the gym? It just is.
No. No. The answer is not it just is. This is where this aspect of his analysis falls apart. The answer to that question isn't it just is. The answer to his question is, whatever we desire, when we desire it, we deem to be good. It appears good in consequence of our desiring it. But we often come to find later, with remorse, that what we thought was good at the time turned out to be bad for us in the long run, in the course of our lives. The reason that somebody would go to the gym even though they want to stay home and eat gummy bears and play Nier Automata more in that moment is because they're choosing the real good as opposed to the merely apparent good. They're choosing long-term goods for themselves, goods that will affect the quality of their entire life as a whole, the conditions of their lives, as opposed to the temporary comfort and satisfaction that they would get by staying home. They've determined through analysis that staying home and eating gummy bears, while temporarily satisfying, will injure the quality of their lives in the long run. The answer to that question isn't it just is. The answer to that question is all of our desires, in the same way that everything moves relative to the speed of light, all of our desires move relative to the good. And there's the real good and the apparent good. There's a good that's good that is things that are decisions, choices that are really good for us in the long run, like exercising and staying healthy so that our life is longer, better, and staying home and eating gummy bears, which merely appears good because it'll satisfy us in the short term. That's a very important thing. We can choose between those two options. And a person who wants to stay home and eat gummy bears rather than, like me, the person who ought to be going to a gym ought to. The person who chooses to stay home is making the wrong choice for himself. The good life, a whole good life well lived, is the end to which we do everything else. Everything that we do is a means to a good life. If I were to ask Alex, why did you buy all this video equipment? Why did you make this YouTube channel? Why did you decide to go to, did he go to Oxford or Cambridge? Forgive me, Alex, on the 1 in 10 billion chance that you see this. Why did you go to the college that you chose to go to? He might say, like, because I wanted to have a successful YouTube channel, because having this equipment would help me to do that. I wanted to have a career in a thing that I enjoyed doing. I wanted this to be, all these plans to be successful and come to fruition. They asked, well, why did you want those things? On and on. Eventually, Alex would answer, because I want to have a good life. But if I then asked him, why do you want to have a good life? The only answer he could give is because I want to have a good life. The good life is something that we pursue for its own sake. Those are the parameters in which we make choices. The chocolate and vanilla, those aren't moral choices. Those aren't choices for which there are right and wrong answers, better and worse outcomes. Unless you accidentally eat chocolate when it's disgusting. And the choices that we make with respect to that which will better our lives in the long run, or harm our lives in the long run, for the sake of temporary psychological happiness, those are the parameters within which we can freely choose. And by freely choose, I mean deliberately stave off temporary apparent goods and choose long-term remote goods. So that is the answer. Welcome, Ed.
Or maybe it isn't, and some people stay at home and eat junk food instead. For these people, why is the desire to sit around or to eat junk food stronger than the desire to be healthy?
Well, what's the answer? What's the answer? There is an answer.
It just is.
No, it isn't just. The answer is not it just is. The answer is because it appears good to them. If somebody were to give them moral counsel, if somebody were to give me moral counsel and say, hey, Gabriel, you shouldn't be sitting home eating gummy bears. You should go out and go to the gym and take care of yourself because you have, it'll make your life better. It'll make your family's life better. You'll live longer. You'll have more energy. You'll be able to do more of the things that you want to do. Those are the kinds of things, those are the answers to that question. These aren't, the motives by which you do these things are not unexaminable or unintelligible. They're actually pretty simple. Ed says, maybe they had a bad day and was exhausted. Sure, and if you have a bad day and you're exhausted, you miss a day at the gym, fine. If that develops into a habit, now you're in trouble. The only rule in moral philosophy, what I think is the correct moral philosophy, is that you should try to form good habits. You're supposed to, on the whole, be in the habit of morality is the habit of right choice, and I think we can make moral choices. I think moral choices are the things that we can make. And when I say moral, I don't mean like deontological, this is good in itself and that kind of thing. I mean exactly the formula that I gave before, real and apparent goods. We can choose real goods and forsake apparent goods. We can forsake apparent goods for the sake of the whole good life, and I think we ought to. I think that's something that we ought to do. We're driven to do by nature.
Again, remember, you can't control the strengths or objects of your desires. It's they that control you.
I don't think that that's true. See, now we're in territory where we're talking about competing desires. The desire to stay home and be lazy, or the desire to go to the gym. This was a very good example that Aryan Foster gave. So, as I said, all of our desires move relative to the good. So our desire for the good life is the driving force there, is the thing that drives us. Not the I want to stay home or I want to go to the gym. Those are means to an end. We choose means, we don't choose ends. There you go. We choose means, we don't choose ends.
And if that doesn't unease you, repeat those words again to yourself until it does. So even when you don't want to do something but you do it anyway, this is only ever because of a stronger and equally uncontrollable desire to do something that requires you to do it.
It's not an uncontrollable desire. We can be convinced by what I just said, that we can look forward into our lives and see that our lives will be improved by choosing the real good, the remote long-term good, and forsaking the apparent good, which is the immediate temporary good. Ed says, the desire to go hit on that girl you have a crush on. Yeah, I mean, there's an analysis you can make there under those circumstances. But those competing means, those aren't driving us. The desire for the good life is the thing that's driving us. Is that still determinism? If determinism means anything short of I am a island agent unto myself, a blank slate upon which I write my entire destiny de novo, if anything short of that is determinism, then everybody should be a determinist. I don't know that that's what that... It might mean that. I'm not sure.
In other words, all of your actions really are controlled by your wants. And I really mean this. This is what really convinced me of the non-existence of free will.
Let me just say, I want to repeat again, all of our actions are controlled by our desire for the good. And then within that, we need to talk about the difference between the real and apparent good.
If you aren't convinced that everything you do is either because you want to or because you're forced to, please pause the video and just really think about this. I promise that any example you can think of has a hidden want lying behind it. Leave an example in the comments if you have to. I'm sure someone else can find it if you can't.
Well, he's right. He's just talking about them like they're these esoteric forces that we just don't understand and that just are. And that's the part that I take issue with.
So now, as promised, let's start putting this together. There are two reasons you will ever do anything, because you want to or because you're forced to. Of course, if you're forced to do something, then you're definitely not acting freely, and nobody would deny that. So that just leaves your wants. But, well, we've already concluded that you can't control your wants, so actions motivated by wants aren't really free either. So being forced to do something isn't free will, and wanting to do something isn't free will. But being forced or wanting to do something are the only reasons why you do anything.
That's not true. So if we talk again about choosing between means, not ends, choosing between means, the kind of thing that Alex is doing, persuasive rhetoric, persuasive argument, we are intellectual beings that are capable of being persuaded by these arguments, that the things that can be demonstrated to benefit us. So we human beings desire knowledge. We desire to have a hold of the truth. If what Alex is saying is true, then accepting what he's saying is good for me, and I'll accept it if I'm rational. That is, there is a third option there. In terms of doing something, we will accept arguments and ways of living, model our lives on certain principles if they appear good to us. That's an intellectual, rational pursuit. I think that is a power exclusive to human beings, and I think it's a third reason that we might do something, is because we've been persuaded intellectually that this or that is correct.
Hence, free will is conclusively...
Now that also moves relative to the good. Remember, everything moves relative to the good. Whether it merely appears good to us or it's really good to us, we will move relative to the good.
An illusion. Now, I use the word illusion purposefully here. One thing that nobody needs convincing of is the fact that we all feel like we do have free will. I certainly do, and so does Sam Harris, and so did Bertrand Russell as far as I know. But then, I suppose, so would an artificial intelligence that we've programmed to feel as though it does have control. And what really is the difference between a mind made of silicon and one made of flesh?
The intellect.
In relation to liberty of thought. Well, that's a topic for another video,
sure,
or perhaps an episode of Black Mirror, but you can see that this illusion is incredibly important. So I just want to briefly explain why I think we feel this illusion. So... is free will an illusion? So I don't think that the ability to choose between means, as I said before, is illusory. I think that's an intellectual process that we can demonstrate happens in human beings and doesn't happen in non-human animals. I think I could demonstrate that. The funny thing is that in other areas of life where it feels like we're doing stuff, we're actually not. This is I won't go into this too much because I'm not sure that he does in this video. We don't actually think thoughts. Thoughts come to us. They don't, like, I don't think, let's see, what's in my head right now? I don't think. James Baldwin was a great writer.
that came to me. Just, I don't even know why. Well, I'm sure if I thought about it, I could think of a few examples, but we don't actually control very much of our thinking, except in the intellectual sense that I described before. That I think we do. But when it comes to so thoughts will come to us based on what we're focusing on. So if you're studying calculus and you're reading a calculus book, you're going to have lots and lots of answers to calculus questions coming to you a lot. You're also going to have a lot of other bullshit that's back there rattling around for whatever reason. So we can focus the energies of our attention, but we can't think thoughts, really. It's kind of weird. So in some senses, I think he's correct. We are sort of... in many ways, when it feels like we're in control of certain things, we're really not, and it's a little creepy.
So firstly, and most obviously, it's easy to see that this illusion is mightily beneficial to our evolution as a species, and I personally have a similar speculative view of the emergence of free will to my view on the emergence of consciousness as a whole, that it only exists because it aids our survival, but it's become so complex and ingrained in our biology that we feel strangely apart from it and have developed the fortunate or unfortunate side effect of self-awareness, depending on who you ask.
I think the reason that we feel like we're outside of it is because we kind of are. If we weren't, we wouldn't be able to analyze our own states and our own nature in this way. We are standing apart from it now when we're analyzing it. We would have to be in order to see it. So that's, again, an intellectual power that I think human beings have.
But more than this, I think it's because there really is a difference between jumping and being pushed. That is, there is a difference in experience between being forced to do something and doing something because you want to. Now, this is something that Matt Dillahunty has alluded to, and in fact, I'll play a short clip of him here. Now, this soundbite was also responded to by Stephen in a response that he made to Matt, a third video he's done on the topic. But again, though agreeing entirely with Stephen, I have more to add as well.
I'm talking about it from a conceptual standpoint. And the example that I'd used in New York was if Sam jumped off stage, that would be him as an agent taking an act of volition. It doesn't matter if it was predetermined by the universe or not. But alternately, I could throw him off the stage. And the difference between those two events sums up everything that I think is valuable about the notion of free will.
Now, this is why I wanted to be precise in my definition of free will, because for many people, the first definition they think of is the ability to do whatever you want. But
so I kind of alluded to that a little bit. I don't think we have the ability to do whatever, or I don't think we have the ability to act within a set of parameters. So rather than being a free will advocate or a determinist or a compatibilist, I think I would, what would I call myself? A parametarian? Ooh, that sounds like a intellectual as hell term. I'm going to use that. I'm a parametarian. I don't think we're constrained by physical laws of motion, and I don't think that we're utterly free to, I don't think that we're utterly controlling everything. I think that we have freedom within a set of parameters. Not constraints, but parameters. There you go.
I think this is misleading. This, however, is the definition I think Matt is implicitly using here, and I'll explain why. To be clear though, I don't think Matt is wrong per se, and his conversation with Stephen cleared a lot of this up, but this clip is still representative of a popular view nonetheless. The reason I think there's an experiential difference between jumping and being pushed is because if you're defining free will as the ability to do whatever you want, then you're exercising free will by jumping, but not by being pushed. But just think about that definition.
I think this is an extreme definition of free will.
What does it mean to do whatever you want? Remember, you can't control your wants. So by doing what you want, you're just acting in accordance with something that's out of your control.
See, when we're talking about like discrete acts like jumping or not jumping or being pushed or something like that, we're not really getting to the heart of anything. We can be totally not in control of those things, but those aren't the things that we usually think about when you think about making choices. We can moderate our desires. That's something that we have the power to do. And we see people doing this all the time. Alex does it. That's why he's successful. We can moderate our desires. I don't think that whether did you jump because it was your choice or because something happened or something startled you, like somebody doing the dishes over there or something. I don't think this matters. Maybe it does to some people. Doesn't matter to me.
It's more accurate to say, rather than you can do whatever you want, that you can only do what you want. Of course.
No, that's, well, your wants are, I feel like I'm just saying the same thing over and over again. They're geared toward the good. So you're going to want to do what appears good to you. After that point, we start talking about moral oughts, and then we start talking about real and apparent goods, and I'm just repeating myself.
Of course that's true. We've already covered this. And it's not freedom to be told you can do anything as long as it's this. The takeaway from my video today to conclude this whole complicated and fearful affair should be this. Yes, you can do whatever you want. You just can't choose what it is that you want. And where's the freedom in that?
You can moderate your desires.
If this video convinced you, consider why. If not, consider why not. It's out of your control. What I'm saying will either convince you or it won't, and you don't get to decide on that. But whichever way you fall, why not try exercising your free will by hitting subscribe and by watching my discussion with Steve?
I'm already described to him. So I hope that made sense. Do we have free will? I don't think that's a thing. I don't think that's a category of things. I don't think free will is this thing that we have. I think that we have the ability to, within recognition that we seek after the good, I think we have the ability to rationally and intellectually determine the difference between the real good and the apparent good, and that we can freely choose real goods and apparent goods. And I think that if we choose apparent goods in the habit as a pattern of behavior, that we ought not to, and we can tell people that they ought to choose the real goods. So that's what I think. See ya.